Hey, everybody, we are recapping this last Sunday's message, and we started a new series in the book of Exodus. And Exodus is the story how we're exiting bondage and entering the purpose that God has for his people. Now, I tell you what, the whole premise of this message was that God remembers his people. God remembers his people. And I think it's a good reminder for us because maybe you've gone through your life and you feel like God maybe has gone quiet, or you feel like God has maybe turned his back on you, or he doesn't listen to your prayers. Or sometimes we get in our mental space and we think that God only listens to certain people. We have to go to a pastor, we have to go to a priest, but he doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about what I'm going through. And Exodus is a great reminder. And I love the way the book of Exodus starts off because it starts off with God initiating. God is hearing the cries of his people. Now, I want you to be a good student of your word and understand where we're at. We've been talking a lot about the birthright. We've been talking about how we, as the church, we carry the blessings of Abraham. We carry the responsibility. We are called to walk in the blessings that Abraham walked in. We're called to walk in that responsibility, that birthright as well. And we see after Jacob and Esau and that whole debacle that we've already talked about, the nation of Israel comes to Egypt through various events. They become enslaved by the Egyptians. They come under oppression. But Exodus starts by telling us that even while they were oppressed, even while they were not in their homeland, they were fruitful. And that's part of the blessing. That's part of the birthright, that they're going to be fruitful. And they're going to, you remember the promise, they're going to be like the sands of the sea and the stars of the sky. And the point that we made in the message was bondage does not erase the birthright. If you feel oppressed, that doesn't mean that God has turned his back on you. God has not turned his back. We can look at the person of God. We can look at his attributes and his character. He is not one to ever turn his back on his covenants. He will not turn his back on his people. And that doesn't mean that our feelings aren't valid. I understand that we can feel alone and we can feel oppressed and we can feel enslaved and in bondage. But just because we feel that way doesn't mean that God is not faithful. And I want to encourage you to build yourself up in that. If it seems like a quiet time in your spiritual life where it feels hard to hear from the Lord, or it just feels like you're going through routine, to really build yourself up and go, God does care. God is involved. God does hear me. And we see that in the Exodus story. God hears his people. His face is towards them. He's not turned his back on the nation of Israel. And he's the same today. So just because we may feel oppressed, we may feel bondage, that does not mean that God has stopped caring or that we failed God or anything like that. It means the birthright is still intact in Christ. This is who you are. This is what you carry. This is what is promised to you, and we can walk in that. The second part that we looked at in this message is that God often works through faithful people who are vastly overlooked. I know everybody wants to think about Moses here, and Moses, even in and of himself, is a guy who would probably be nobody's first choice. We see later in the book of Exodus that when God calls Moses, that Moses even tries to disqualify himself because he stutters and different things like that. However, we see in the book of Exodus that God begins his redemptive work with the nation of Israel through two midwives. And these midwives heard the command of the Pharaoh to say, kill the boy children, and they chose to fear God. They chose to honor God, and they chose to let those children live, to disobey Pharaoh's word, let those children live, and the Lord blessed them for it. And then we see a little later on, some of the one of the little boys that they let live was Moses, and Moses' mom refuses the commands of Pharaoh to obey God and to be faithful to God. And God uses that mom, and Moses is put in the wicker basket and sent down the Nile River. And then again, another unlikely lady here is Moses' sister, who watches from a distance, keeps watch, is faithful. And when Moses comes into Pharaoh's daughter's care, it's Moses' sister who says, hey, I can go find you a mother to nurse the child. And it's fascinating to think about that Moses' family was then paid by Pharaoh to raise Moses. It's a wonderful thing that God works out here. But the point is that God uses often these people that we can't remember their names and we can't pronounce their names correctly. And we just, history forgets them, but God uses these ladies, these midwives, these moms, sisters, and Pharaoh's daughter to start his redemption work towards the nation of Israel, redeeming Israel and bringing them out of oppression, bringing them out of slavery from the Egyptians. God works through these overlooked characters, and we're going to see that again and again in the book of Exodus. And I want to encourage you today, if you feel overlooked, you feel like you're not anointed, you're not a pastor, you're not an elder, a deacon, you failed your spiritual gift test, whatever you are feeling today, God sees you. And I don't want anybody in our church to say, well, I'm just a carpenter. I'm just a banker. I'm just so-and-so. How could God use me? God will work through anyone, and he will work through the most overlooked people in our society because it gives him the most glory. So take heart today. If you will be faithful to God, he will be faithful to you, and he will work through you. And finally, we ended the entire message focused on these scriptures, and I'll let you read them. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 23 through 25, we see the action of God. We see these amazing verbs that God is doing. God sees the plight of Israel. He hears their cries. He knows them. He's engaged in what's going on. He sees, he knows, and God acts. And I think as we start talking about birthright and we start talking about responsibility of things we have to walk through and that we're going to be stepping into as a church, we always have to keep in mind that it is God doing the work. God is the one acting. God is the one doing it. And God has already factored in what he's going to do, and it's amazing to think about the foresight of God in the Exodus story through these midwives, through Moses' mom and his sister. And it just so happened that Pharaoh's daughter was bathing in the river at that time and in that place. The coincidence is amazing, but it's the foresight of God. Before we see the recorded God hearing and God turning towards Israel and hearing their cries and knowing their pain, he already worked out all these details. And so we can rest in the faithfulness of God. And I want you to rest assured, God remembers you. Whatever you're walking through, whatever diagnosis, whatever hardship, whatever trial we may be going through, God remembers. He is not distant. He is not far. And in fact, Exodus shows us that God is closer than we realize most of the time. So I'm excited to take this journey with you, church, through this amazing book. And I want you to join us on Sundays as we continue through the book of Exodus. We're coming out of bondage, stepping into our purpose, and saying yes to everything God has for us along the way. I'll see you Sunday. God bless you.